President Biden is in Tel Aviv, Israel tonight, meeting with victims and first responders of the recent terror attacks.
The president acknowledged the suffering of the Palestinian people as well. He announced $100 million in humanitarian assistance for both Gaza and the West Bank. The White House says the aid will be distributed through trusted partners to provide clean water, food, medical care, and other essential needs.
Not less than 48 hours following the announcement by President Joe Biden that we were going to send $100 million to Gaza for quote-unquote humanitarian reasons, we got the news that 2 American hostages had been freed. And according to Hamas, that was also for humanitarian reasons. So my question is, what happened to the United States does not negotiate with terrorists? Now, that announcement was immediately followed up by the administration asking Congress for an additional $105 billion in assistance for not only Israel, but also our redheaded stepchild, the independent sovereign nation of Ukraine. And according to the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, this budget request is critical to advancing America's national security and ensuring the safety of the American people. I'll be the first to admit I have a terrible memory, but I could swear just a few months back, we were told what the greatest threat to this nation's security was, and it didn't lie in the Middle East with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It wasn't on the borders of Ukraine or Russia. It wasn't even on our own southern border.
We're going to single out as the most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy. And I'm not saying this because I'm at a black HBCU. I say it wherever I go.
I have no idea how much of the budget has been put aside in order to fight the relentless army of white supremacists that continue to rear their ugly heads on a daily basis. But it does make me wonder, where is all this money gonna come from? And how possibly could we as a country, up to our ears in debt right now, afford all of this? Well, if you didn't know, over this past weekend, Sky News sat down with our very own U.S. Treasury Secretary, Miss Janet Yellen, in the small country of Luxembourg, located within the EU. She was posed the question, with America's economy in shambles right now, the national debt soaring past the $33.5 trillion mark and going up by the minute, is this country in good enough shape to ensure that all of its interests abroad can continue to be funded while taking care of national interests in our own backyard? Here is a small portion of that interview and her response. Watch.
In terms of what this all means, Paul Tudor-Jones, the famed investor, was on CNBC this week, and he said, "This is the most threatening and challenging geopolitical environment that I've ever seen. At the same time, the US is in its weakest fiscal position since World War II, with debt to GDP at 122%. Can America, can the West afford another war at this time?"
I think the answer is absolutely. America can certainly afford to stand with Israel and to support Israel's military needs. And we also can and must support Ukraine in its struggle against Russia. And look, the American economy is doing extremely well. Inflation has been high and it's been a concern to households. It's come down considerably. At the same time, we have about the strongest labor market we've seen in 50 years with 3.8% unemployment. And at the same time, America, the Biden administration, has passed legislation that is strengthening our economy in the years to come for the medium term. We have 3 historic pieces of legislation: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. And we've seen a burgeoning of investment, especially in manufacturing, an industrial renaissance in the United States. And we're creating good jobs, especially for people don't have a college education, have been left out of really economic progress in the United States. So the United States economy is in a good place.
Are you serious?
In terms of the fiscal situation, I don't know where 122 comes from. The U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio is about 98% at this point. And the interest expense, which is a more relevant statistic, still remains manageable. Now, it is true with higher interest rates, and those higher interest rates may persist, although that's not clear. We have to be careful about our fiscal path, but President Biden is committed to a sustainable fiscal path. You know, we've raised $60 billion to strengthen the Internal Revenue Service. There are enormous uncollected taxes that are due. The so-called tax gap is estimated at $7 trillion over the next decade. And finally, we're modernizing and strengthening our Internal Revenue Service so it can better serve Americans and also collect the taxes that are due. So our fiscal situation is by no means unsolvable.
Now, if you guys remember, back in January, the House Freedom Caucus, led by Matt Gaetz, drove a hard bargain before allowing Kevin McCarthy to gain the gavel and become Speaker of the House. Remember, McCarthy had pledged to hold the swamp accountable. His first remarks were him vowing to be the check and provide some balance to the Biden policies. He said our very first bill will be to repeal the funding for 87,000 new IRS agents. He promised to have oversight hearings on the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, the origins of COVID, and the weaponization of the FBI. We'll use the power of the purse and the power of the subpoena to get the job done. And here we are in October. None of those things came to fruition. And like he should have, Matt Gaetz pulled fucking Kevin McCarthy's card. And bravo for him doing that. Finally, someone is being held accountable for completely misleading the American people.
Let me be clear. If Hamas diverts or steals the assistance, they will have demonstrated once again that they have no concern for the welfare of the Palestinian people. And it will end. As a practical matter, it will stop the international community from being able to provide this aid.
I don't know about you, but I feel a lot better hearing from the leader of the free world that Hamas isn't going to be able to use any of this money to fund terrorist activities in the future. Can we continue to afford to pay for 2 different wars in 4 different countries on 2 different continents? Probably, as long as the suckers, the American people, you and I, continue to pay our taxes. More than likely, they will continue to empty the treasury and continue to get people killed. All right, this seems like a good place to leave it, guys. Hopefully, we'll be up for a live stream very soon. As always, thank you for all the likes, the views, the comments. My new subscribers, my OGs, I appreciate each and every one of you. We are here to break the wheel. This is Ape Nation. I'm the Massalorian, and I'm out.